In this video, I'm going to show you how to initialize your GitHub repository with a project. Now, this is what the first person does. So there's going to be one GitHub repository that's going to be shared by all 3, 4, 5 members of your team, but only one person needs to do this set of steps. So make sure that you know who in your team is actually going to be creating the initial project in the repository. So I'm going to start with this demo UI project that I worked with in week 1 and week 2. And as I said, I've already created a GitHub repository for your team, but let me show you what that process looks like pretty quickly. So I'm logged into GitHub as myself, and I'm going to create a new repository. And under owner, I'm going to select the PCC CIS 234A organization, and then I'm going to give it a repository name. So this is going to be my demo UI project. And then optionally, I can add a description. I didn't for your repositories. And then I can either select public or private because this is a repository inside of this existing organization. If you create a new repository as an individual user who is not attached to an organization, it actually costs you money to make a private repository. But since I'm associated with this particular organization, I can do it at no additional cost. So, private repository. And then I initialized your repository with a README that just basically has the repository name in it. And this is a good start because it will let you clone the repository before checking it in. So I'm going to go ahead and create that repository. Okay, so now I have an empty repository except for this readme.md file, which just has demo UI and horizontal rule under it, but no files here. So what I want to do is get this code here from my demo UI project into that repository. And so the first step in doing that is to clone the repository to my local disk, and then I can copy these files into that local copy of the repository. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start up git bash. And I'm going to cd to the place where I want a local copy of the repository. So here is my current demo UI project under downloads. And where I want to put this repository is actually going to be under a repos folder that I already made in downloads, and I've already cloned a few repositories into here. So this is going to be where I keep my repositories. It doesn't really want to be in downloads, but I just did that because it was convenient. You probably want to have a projects folder under documents or somewhere like that for your repositories. So I'm going to cd in git bash to /c users mark downloads repos. And if you're familiar with Linux, this will be familiar to you. If you haven't, then you don't really need to know that much about it. But there's a CMD version of Git as well that might be more convenient. So if I use ls, you can see my repositories. So what I want to do here is I want to git clone https github.com pcc-cis 234a, and then the name of the repository that I just made, .git. And then I have to log in. So here's my username and my password. Okay, so it cloned everything into the repository, and you see it made a folder for demo UI with some stuff in it. There's a .git repository that has my, or a .git folder that has my settings in it, and this readme.md file that was in the GitHub repository. So I'm going to cd into repos. Actually, I'm in repos already, so I want to cd into demo UI. And then I can do git status to see where I am. So this says that I'm on the master branch. Everything in my repository, my local repository, matches what's in the remote repository. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and let's close this project. And then in my demo UI folder, I'm going to select all and then copy, and then go over here into demo UI and paste. So now I have a copy of everything from my project in this demo UI repository. And then I'm going to go back to IntelliJ and I'm going to open or import. So users, mark, downloads, repos, demo UI, and open that. Okay, so now I have my repository open, and since it's just a copy of my working project, it should work. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the run button. And it works. Does the same thing as before. Let's see, top comedy TV series. Yeah, so everything's working fine. I'm going to go ahead and close this. Now, I could just check in all of these differences. So let's actually go ahead and take a look at what's going on. I'm not quite ready to check in yet, but I can see what's different between my local repository and the remote repository. So git status from demo UI. So basically, there's a new idea folder and demo UI.iml, and then there's a lib folder, an out folder, and a source folder. And all of these things are in my local repository, but not in the remote repository. So some of these I want to include in the remote repository, and others I don't. So like this .idea folder, basically I don't want any of this stuff to be in my remote repository because these are all a bunch of XML files that get changed every time I interact with this project. So to ignore this .idea folder, the way I do that is inside my demo UI folder, I create a new file. So right click on that, create a new file, and I call that .gitignore. And then this is going to be, I don't want to automatically add stuff. I like to do it from git bash. So I'm going to say cancel. So this is going to be a list of all the folders and paths and files that I don't want to include in my repository. So basically ignore that. So I want to ignore .idea. So if I add that and then go back to git bash and do git status again, you'll see there's no .idea in the list anymore, and that's because I'm ignoring it. There is a .gitignore file, but I actually want to include that in the repository so that anybody who clones the repository is going to get that. Now, I want to include the lib folder because that has my JTDS library and will have any other libraries. This out folder I don't want to include because this is going to have binary files in it, all the class files and stuff like that, which are going to change every time I recompile. And the important part is basically that if these change, I don't want to try to resolve differences between them because they're output files from compilation. But I actually want to keep this folder because it's going to make it easier to set the project up later on. So let me show you how to do that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ignore out/star. So that means ignore everything in the out folder. But I'm going to not ignore out/.getKeep. And this is just an empty file that I'm going to create that has this name. And by not ignoring it, it's going to remember that there's a folder here that I want to keep. So the basic idea is that when you clone a Git repository, if a folder doesn't have any files, it won't create the folder when you clone the repository. So if I just do this, that's going to ignore everything inside of out, and so I won't get an out folder when I clone the repository. But if I put a dummy file in that folder and I don't ignore it, it will have to create this out folder in order to also include the .gitkeep file. So that's why I'm doing that. And then in this out folder, I'm going to create a new file called .gitkeep. And I don't want to associate anything, but let me just say OK here. And then if I go ahead and do git status now, good. So you see that out is in the list, but I'm ignoring out/stars, so none of the files should be. Now, the folder structure already reflects my n-tier architecture, so you really want to start with a data package, a logic package, and a UI package. And then inside the UI package, everybody is going to put their forms. So you're going to have different forms for each application. But then you want to try to share these logic folders and data folders. In the next video, I'll show you what to do if you're starting with a clone of this project and you want to create your own branch to work in. So git status is okay. I have my git ignore. I'm going to do git add dot, and that will move all of the files that are different in my local repository to the staging area. So you see all of these green files, these are things that are going to get checked into the remote repository. And so this is my chance to double check that I have everything I want and I'm not including a bunch of class files or XML files and stuff like that. So other than this demo UI.iml, which is a project full file, so I think it's okay to include it, everything else looks good here. Importantly, I don't have any class files in my out folder, but I do have the out folder. So I'm going to do git commit -m initial project commit. Oh, and I haven't initialized my personal settings on this yet, so let me go ahead and do that. If you haven't done that, do this as well. And now I'm going to do my git commit. Good, so it went ahead and committed everything. And now what I want to do is push this commit to the remote repository so that it's available on Git. So if I go back over to here, my demo UI project, and do a reload, you'll see there's no differences yet. I still just have this README file, and that's because all of the changes I've made so far are to my local repository. But this is going to be the thing that makes those changes on the remote repository. Okay, so let me go ahead and reload now. And this is what we see. So I have my source folder with including everything down to demo UI. I have my out folder, which just has the .gitkeep file in it. And I have my .gitignore and my lib folder, which has JTDS in it. And my out folder is empty, except for gitkeep. But I already said that.